Just double checking on Twitter. All right. It looks like we are back for episode 20 of the Proof of Beauty podcast. Before we got on here, we were just having a pregame conversation about Azuki's latest profile. So I'm going to pull that up and we can just continue chatting about it.
Yeah, definitely. Collector's page. Well, this is definitely giving more bones to the kind of like boutique experience we can make for your own users within your own site.
You know what it just hit me. I think is what's really interesting is if they could have built this, they totally could have built their own marketplace, right? But they chose not to.
I wonder why.
I mean, they could have made their own and nobody uses it, which is not a big deal,
right? Which I think that's what I'm trying to imply is I think building your own bespoke marketplace is not there yet.
Is it a question they're not there yet? They don't want to spend the resources, or do you think it's actually bad to have your own marketplace? Like, there's three different things here.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where I was trying to almost allude to with this with that point. It's like they made a very deliberate choice to spend resources on this, not that. And I'm like, it's really kind of stirring my head. It's like, what are they trying to think?
They could have definitely done both in the same amount of time, for sure.
Right. And I think I think it's more of a business decision than that of like a crapper.
It's a strategy.
Women count.
Strategy
just
decision.
bowling hours.
Do either of you guys have your wallet connected to the collector's profile page?
For me, my Twitter, no.
Okay, I was gonna say go ahead.
I don't want to link too much of my identity to that one specific wallet.
I hear you.
I don't do that.
That makes perfect sense. I was going to say though, if one of you guys want to pull up the collector's profile page where they show all the badges, that was a really nice UI. It's loading a little slow on my end, so I figured one of you guys would probably be able to give a better showcase of how it works functionally. But it's a really nice, smooth development. Like it's really nice.
Yeah, let me see if we can pull somebody's who publicly already revealed their Azuki profile and just kind of stock theirs.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
One is actually pretty interesting. So the whole parallax effect and on the hover of these emblems is really nice. It makes it feel like gamey, right? But so how long? So I guess Azuki launched in January 2022 this year. So I mean, the timeline of progress, I guess, has been pretty good so far, right? It's like they did that, and then beans, and then also the jacket, and then kind of probably now they're in the software phase of future release, right, David?
Yeah. I mean, I know that certainly they have some other things going on with them. But yeah, I think they're a lot more like a game studio that's not making games yet. They have the artists. Clearly they have a very good graphic design team that's willing to spice stuff up, and then they have the engineers. But more importantly, I think they have the patience and the money to buy that kind of patience to make these things. It's not speaking as a front end, these things are not particularly hard to build, but it takes a lot of time to do it well, to make these experiences feel as polished as this certainly feels, right? I think it takes time, and it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of crafts. It takes a lot of pride, I think, also in your work to create something like this.
So this is the profile sent over here. This is somebody who created a profile, made it public. And so you're able to, I guess you earn as you, I don't know, do certain things within the Azukiverse. How do you earn these emblems, guys?
Some of these are trait based, I think, and then some of them's you own an Azuki. Congrats, right? If you look look at the square here, right? The broom is cut off. But then if you look on top, they clearly had to add more back.
Let's see.
Right.
The
full broom is there. Right.
So the fact that this is a noticeable detail is interesting, right? It's because I would assume they have the full asset. already.
Maybe they do actually. Maybe they've
I would
designed
assume-
everything initially with the full
Yeah.
asset, but then they
Interesting.
don't use it because it's a square in the beginning, right? Like,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
cropped, maybe, or maybe they had to redo it. Who knows, right? Like that is for the team to answer.
And then looking at just like, because I at least have some familiarity with like shonen anime and stuff like this, like, I mean, they're more on the older side than on the newer side of anime, I would say, in terms of their art style. And then also, like, I'm just looking at kind of the different elements that go on in each one of their pieces, right? It's like they all have an item of some kind, like, and then like some special effects, and then an outfit of some kind. Like, to me, it's very odd. Like, they have a lot of juice to work with, like, in terms of like they can every item can easily be, they can flesh out a story, right, with some kind of combinatorial effect, right? And like there's a lot of precedent in anime and manga for these types of, for like, you can just pull
Right.
ideas, you'll
Yeah,
have
for
something
sure.
to work with, right? And so
Like-
that's what I'm saying. It's like the observation of like anything outside of the square is like, if I was a user of Azuki, a holder, I would have been waiting for that type of universe to be fleshed out. It's like, what's stopping them? It's just a matter of brute force. Like, they just have to do it, right?
Money and capital, right?
Is it money and capital? Because how much money does it take to come up with ideas? Right?
Well,
And
not
do
just
it?
Hard
ideas,
to
but
maintain good ideas.
Yeah.
but to do it, right? And to
Mhm.
bring the best talent to do it.
Yeah. It's not necessarily
Big time.
nature, right? It's just a matter of iterative brute force.
Yeah, but again, right, brute force costs money to an extent, right? Like you're paying
Yeah.
somebody to do the brute force.
They're probably
I
in the
know
middle-
that they are well
probably in the middle-
capitalized as a business.
Yeah,
Right.
they're probably in the middle of designing it right now. But like, that's what I would expect out of a universe, right? You see what I'm saying? Not like the
Right.
That's what
Well,
I'm thinking.
I think of all the well capitalized labs, whatever they call themselves, they all were
Mhm.
pursuing like the same problem very differently.
Yeah, because you have to also remember, it's
Right.
like all the animes and the manga, they're made by very small teams too, on like an extremely tight schedule, weekly release schedule, and they're still they're able to create a very sophisticated layout of a universe, right? So
Which
it's like,
I think Azuki's already doing, because they have, if you go to like azuki.com/world, they've already kind of started to kind of stub out a world. Now I don't
Right.
know if they're gonna like pursue this in a very like high first quality variant of like producing a show or producing some kind of actual
no, it doesn't have to be a
content you
show.
consume.
It's not even, the show is like the distillation of all the ideas. They first have to actually have the elements.
Which I think they do. I think if you go on their page and you start playing around with it, they're very lore centric, I think, with how they want to start subtly implying the world with yeah, and they have like a little music player in the corner. Like
Yeah.
they put a lot of love into this.
Yeah, this is really
so, I
cool.
mean, so I saw this stuff, but I'm talking more about the items in the picture.
Which I think they're just holding it. I just think they're just holding.
Oh, I need to get out of this.
I think they're just holding on to that for now. I think they know what they're gonna do with the items. I think it's a matter of time. Maybe they just don't have the right idea yet, or they're working on something. It's coming.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
could be
so-
timing. You're right about that. It could be, they recognize the whims of the market and they're taking advantage of this time to build out the product that they want to release in the future, or
Yeah.
they're preparing to source out the team they need to build that product if they don't have that technical capital, right? But
Yeah, so I'm trying to.
But also, I don't really think they're in a rush, right? Like they're not
No, probably not.
fighting a timeline right now. They can work and ship at their pace, given that money isn't a problem.
Right.
It isn't.
It sounds their approach is kind of similar to ours, is where they can kind of try to make stuff up in real time, essentially, without having too strong tied to any particular idea, right? So I'm looking at I looked at the world thing already a while ago. Pretty much what that is just a slideshow art. They're just different frames of art, test art that they created with these characters, and are showing different things. It's not actually, they're not really fleshing out anything. So, and then also from a marketability standpoint, in terms of something to sell to their existing holders and a new customer base, it makes sense to go in the direction of comic books and video anime, like traditional anime. But what I'm saying is like that approach allows you to kind of make things up in a weekly fashion. But But the impressive things about anime teams and actual anime and manga teams is that they're able to do that, but still come into the whole process with a very sophisticated starting place of their world, right? It's like I'm looking at things like Naruto and like, yes, they crafted those things in weekly release fashion over like a decade essentially, but even going back, if you watch it, like even as a fan of the show who's watched most things and lots of those series have survived is because they started with a level of sophistication from the authorship, right? That was able to like it was sophisticated enough
Right.
and enough juicy enough that they were able to keep it going like that. But if you just make up stuff weekly without that level of sophistication, you're gonna run out. It's not.
I mean,
you're gonna run out of
yeah.
gas, at some point.
That's an entirely different kind of production that I'm sure most studios operate under. Hey, I mean, like when I think about who operates under that kind of fashion today, maybe South Park, because they're able to put content out so quickly, right? But I would imagine in order for your studio to be able to put something out quickly, whether or not it's a big team or small team, you're going to have like a really solid concrete way of doing that. Like your workflow's got to be probably really set up well to get something out in a week, because technically it's probably like 6 working days, right?
Yeah, I really don't know. Like, well, it's important detail to for me at least. That, like, if just showing the graphics outside of the square is important enough for like in the PFP space, like that would warrant attention. I mean, it sounds like the bar is pretty low for the universe.
Well, it's a bit of like, I always think of like innovative features with NFTs. Like I'm stretching the word innovative here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I always feel like it's like it goes to that quote where like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, did it actually fall? I feel like that's like a very big thing about NFTs. Like you can do a lot of big work, you ship it, and then there's nobody really there to care about it. It's not innovative. Like it's kind of like I don't think like again like I think we're front end devs. We know what kind of work it would take to build this. It's not a black science by any means, right? But I think a lot of us are like pumping, hitting the metaphorical drums, getting excited in part because they have a larger reach and more people are willing to get excited and more people are willing to kind of metaphorically hear the tree fall and be willing to observe something new, which isn't even much newness, right? It's still relatively tame.
Yeah, exactly. All I want to see is them take risk in some kind of creative risk in some kind of fashion, right? And like what I mean by that, it's like I'm giving a very straightforward example from anime. Is like, all right, like you may or may not watch a show, but in Bleach, like they revealed the final version of this guy's sword or whatever, right, in the first season. And that's a show that was more than a decade long, like 12 seasons, whatever. They locked themselves in creatively to that feature set for that character, the main character of the show, right? That's creative risk, right? And that's still considered one of the best seasons of that show. And so what I'm talking, that's really what I mean by like they could have released like all right, this is what one of the items here we're laying out like some of the story and kind of like this
particular, which I think they're building their way up there. I think they're going in that direction. I mean, I think it's a very young business. It literally is a sub a year existence.
Right.
They had to deal with their own controversies and whatever. I mean, again, I don't talk to that team often or at all, right? So I don't know what their actually is their headspace, but we're speculating on conjecture here. They have creative heads. They have their creative heads screwed on. I think for me at least, I'm very curious, both in part as like a somebody who owns some, but then also as like somebody else creating NFTs.
Yeah,
a lot to learn from. A lot to learn about how are they creatively trying to express something.
Yeah. Also, I think one of the things I'm realizing too is like not realizing, my observation is like if you're taking essentially a long time or like a month or two between like a release of anything, it doesn't even matter, right? It's like you kind of need, at least for an NFT project, you need something to sell. So like Azuki's probably not gonna release something unless it's like it's a token or some kind of like reward a direct reward to the holders, right? They're not going to iterate through a universe that has no necessary like a token to sell. Maybe some kind of interaction on the NFT, like the mana thing we're doing now.
Well,
Hmm.
they
So
are
if you
trying
do something
to
like,
sell the
yeah,
brand. The brand being the most valuable asset they have now, right?
yes,
If I was Azuki, I'd be very hard pressed to want to sell a token right now, anytime soon.
no, not what I mean
Hmm.
by token, not like at ERC20. I'm just saying any whatever, like whether it's a beans
I
or
think
something.
anything. I think right now their only focus should just be on building out the brand, making the brand more and more valuable. Like it,
Then
because it's like,
they need to do that in almost a weekly fashion. And that's what I'm saying. The main difference, right? It's like if there's time.
well, I think it's just a matter of like what scale of time you want to work with, right? Like if they are doing it at a monthly, I think they're doing it at a monthly, maybe 6 week basis. Sounds like it works for them for their production speed, right? Like I think you
Yes.
can skew that speed towards
Yeah.
whatever their parameterization. But I get it. There is
So,
a cadence to their brand building.
yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
Wouldn't
It's like with the like we're learning things going through the whole mana process now, but what I'm thinking is that if to do features like the mana and transmutation and channeling in the future, it needs to be a very tight release schedule. That's the only way it would work well, in my opinion.
Well, again, I
It's
think
like
it's a
a
reflection of
behavior thing,
what tight is. Because if a
huh?
tight is well, like Azuki does not have to release something every 2 weeks. They have
No,
enough
I'm not saying it's
latent activity,
Mhm.
right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
if it's like a month, I think they're still fine. 2 months, I think they're still fine. A quarter, maybe people are starting to get a little bit confused. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? But if you have a smaller project where more constituent people are a little bit more kind of concerned, maybe you got to be a little tighter on your timeline. I think that cadence is just a reflective state of what are your variables that you're working with within your community, within the project size, within the growth potential you want to work within, and also the technical and money capital that you have to
Yeah.
deliver that sustainably, right? And we're two folks trying to wire up these kind of rituals. It's like some things are, like there's some things we have to not say as Zuki's like, congrats, you did it. We're not going to come close to shipping some things like that. And also we're working with like a different medium. We're not doing that kind of PFPs, whatever, right? Like it's like they rhyme, but yeah, like it. I think there's a lot of grand patterns, but you got to like reshape the patterns to every project.
Yeah, well, so I mean, with the concept of the 721Z, the primary thing we're getting is the backend interactivity, whatever function that we designed for that, right? That's what I'm saying. So if we're using the release schedule has to be relatively tight. I'm using tight very loosely, the word tight very loosely. So, you
Guys,
see what I'm saying?
I just want to chime in real quick and let you know that we have been seeing a little bit of network interference. I'm not too sure how much of what you guys were just talking about was interrupted or not. I did just want to let you guys know, though, in case we experience any more drop-offs.
Yeah, my internet's a little weird today, but
well,
I want.
so, sorry, do you want to go?
I was just going to chime in on what you guys were talking about before. It might be a little off topic now, though. But when you guys were talking about Azuki's brand, it got me thinking about what really is their most valuable thing. And I don't know if it's their brand as much as it is their community. Because at the end of the day, your brand isn't what you say it is. It's what the others say it is, right? And so it's what their community says it is. And I was just thinking about how perhaps that release cadence isn't as important as long as their community feels like they're being well catered to. And putting a collector's profile out there might not seem like a technical revolution, but it does a great thing for their community to be able to showcase to each other their different badges, different experiences they're having within the Azuki world, whatever it is they're building. But I was just thinking about it loosely, but I don't want to continue on with this if you have something you wanted to go on about 721Z.
I do add to that. I've been in their discords and I do think it's like one of their like soft capital that makes certain PFPs work better than others, where it has that kind of like absurdity where people are like, when is the force price going to pump? But then it's a weird balance of like, oh shit, we both have a broom, so we must be somehow should be talking on the same layer, the same wavelength, which materially doesn't really make any sense. right?
Kind of funny like that.
But it's
Yeah.
like the Broom Gang, right? And then there's other. It's the tribal kind of designs. It's
A broom game.
it's really good. But let's say there's I know that this happens
Different
in many
trait
PvPs.
local, trait
Yeah.
tribes, right? You know,
Yeah.
like the Spirit Gang or
Yeah, the Spirit DAO
kinda-
being one of those things, right?
right.
And then there's folks who commission like other artists to like animate their PFPs.
Hmm.
So they're kind of there's a lot of like very like not top down, like not world building, but just like manifesting what does Azuki mean to you,
Right.
and that usually is a good trade of any good PFP, or to an extent any good NFT should have that ability to relate to you a lot more. Because if you don't have that, it becomes more of a quick flip kind of a project, and I think the less you have that, the more it's contingent on a core team pretty much injecting new things
Right.
to that project, and less about just what the community manifests around the thing, right? So
Right.
So yeah, I want to talk what community manifestations and what's the most sophisticated version that you've seen of that?
It would be Bored Apes, probably.
Probably.
That's my hunch.
Like, what specifically?
Well, depending on what you mean by sophistication, if you mean sophisticated to the point where like people like
unsophisticated
are
would
like,
be like you're just rallying around the similarity of images of trait types.
so
That's
I
the-
think
that's the most basic.
if sophistication means like there's a point where it hits like people are like deploying capital in a coordinated way. I think Bored Apes is probably the closest we got to like folks working together to create brands around their
Definitely.
things.
Yeah.
DAOs. There's a lot of like internet. There's like a lot of people now. Their living is pretty much contingent on
coffee,
community they
clothing,
rally.
skateboards,
Right.
different kinds of merch, right?
Yeah, so it's probably one of the more sophisticated. Like, well, in part not because
the
in part it's
project
because
size-
Bored Ape Yuga Labs gave them this power, right? Like
Right.
Yuga's is like have fun,
Yeah.
run wild,
So
manifest, right?
that's more of a result because Bored Apes is so valuable. They're able to easily, like, if you want to go into
I don't think I think they happened upon some of these effects, but they were good at fanning the fire.
So in terms, so sophistication
Mhm.
can mean a couple of different things. It can mean technical sophistication or like time put in by users, just raw time put in. Raw time put in is probably the best.
That's a measurement of sophistication.
Yeah.
The best.
I think there's like
that's the best indication of sophistication. Time put in.
Well, I think capital
Right.
deployed is still one of the better ones.
No.
I think that like
Not really, because capital deploy can be something as simple as all these guys in Discord communicating. It's like, we want to, raid the floors. Like, that's not sophisticated behavior, in my opinion. That's just trading behavior, classic trading.
I think there was a sophisticated rally of the community, though. Be it or not, there were just a few people maybe doing that in Discord. There was almost like it did seem like there was coordination, at least with Bored Apes. But not only that, there was like a rally cry, right? And they did a good job.
Purchasing behavior, though, right? In terms of buying and selling, trading behavior, right? That's
a little bit. And then also in terms of just like
and like coordinated movement, like coordinated activities beyond just even buying and selling, right? Like that usually takes money. Well, like I say that for PFPs, but like then you have like Terraform, where a lot of that is more temporally.
That's a great. Terraform is probably one of the best examples of user sophistication with all the user generated like tooling and websites and stuff like that, right? That's like I would say one of them. And then maybe like Wagdai is pretty up there because like that's the closest to D&D.
Well, Wagdai is a little bit more centralized. I think there's a lot more of a top down. My gut reactions is a little bit more top down. But then like here's a really interesting thing.
Yeah.
I do think that what Math Castles did with their own studio was really interesting in the sense that they created Terraform. It's really high quality. They created it 0% creator fees. They barely even have a website, right? They only have like Twitter identities to work with, a Discord that they talk on very actively. But they don't really talk in a way that like sounds like they're a core member. They just talk as like another big thinker within that community. And effectively, I think they almost like manifested a project that like yeah, it's up to you guys to manifest meaning around it. Like, well, we done our job. Like,
Sure.
like there's like a social contract has already been signed with the community. It's like, yeah, we're gone. We're the core team. We locked ourselves out. We can't even do anything. We barely even have a freaking website. We're not even taking
Right.
money from you guys on the secondary. It's up to you guys to manifest, and we're gonna create a community to help you manifest it as maybe like
Right.
almost like consulting style relationships, like ask us for help kind of a deal, right? And I guess for them it worked. It wasn't, if you were to tell me this like without knowing Terraforms, it would not be immediately obvious that it would be a successful
So this is
way
what I'm
of
talking
creating
about. Like
an
that.
IP.
That is much more. Whatever behavior is happening around Terraform project is much more interesting or admirable than just like rallying around trait types, like in a PFP land, right? It's like that
Well, I think
distinction.
they're both admirable because you don't see that often.
Why?
Different
This kind of
genres, right?
behavior. They're different. It's like comparing a music video and like a like a avant-garde movie. Like they are artistic and valuable in their own ways.
I don't think they compare sense actually. Like really.
I think you're doing apples to oranges, which I think they both have different qualified identifications of like of value, right? Like because Terraforms, you're not gonna have people creating, beef jerky from their IP, right? And that's a pretty sophisticated action.
Yeah.
That is something that
came
out of the whole wisps of the community.
You can look at the similarities, right? It's like I understood it's generative art versus PFP, right? But like the Terraform's concept was essentially is like, all right, this image is supposed to represent this particular point in this 3D volume, right? And then it's like that's where the derivation from the user base is supposed to come from. All right, what does different lands mean, and like why are some things certain like rare than others, and like what's this whole like decay effect that happens with daydreaming and stuff like that. Like they have multiple mechanics, right? And then the community is kind of discovering themselves what this volume actually looks like and what can you do with it, and then they kind of come up with their own stuff. But in Azuki's,
I could just replace all those words with a PFP's same words.
Yeah. So what's the difference between?
Right.
That's what I'm saying, right? So when you're looking at
PFP holders discovering what they can do with their own PFPs.
I think there's a big difference.
Run businesses, right? And
right. There's a commercial application difference, right? Like with the PFP, you can commercialize that and create products. The market you're tailoring to with a Terraform's product is completely different, and there's probably not as many commercial applications, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's non-commercial. That's what makes it the user whatever user behavior is actually sophisticated because there's no monetary value really attached.
Right, but that's why they're so different. As like we're not right.
I think there's merits to both.
But merchandising is like, why is that an interesting? Like,
well, there's money there, right? A lot of people here are trying to leverage the success of their PFP in order to start some sort of a business, leveraging a brand they didn't have to build, right? You're not going to go start a Terraform shirt collection. You might go start a Azuki shirt collection, right? So the commercial application is completely different, even if there is a commercial application, as you mentioned, right?
I think at a pure artistry level, like obviously Terraform's kind of takes the cake here. And
I mean, that's what I'm saying. They both have really, really interesting artistic and very wide universes to work with.
For sure,
we're seeing both.
But then it's like to an argument to me, it's like Avengers Endgame versus like a very good bespoke film that only a certain amount of people watched at like a film festival. Like I think they both are. I come out of those, I think, as a changed person, right? Like I felt a piece that was well produced. Clearly they're catered toward different audiences, their style. There's some things are ran by almost by committee, in like an Avengers kind of product, right? Like, and it's clearly a little bit more commercial, right? But I'm not really saying like one is something more than the other. They're different, and I like to think that, as somebody who creates, I want to come out of them saying like there's something to learn, just different things to learn from these kind of communities, from these kind of artistry, because it's night and day differences, and clearly both worked. And I think it's up to us to kind of just figure out how it works. That's which I don't think that's what I'm not saying this in like a counter argument. I'm just saying that's my observation here, because I don't think that's what you're implying, Ash, at all.
Yeah, no, I'm
But
just
yeah, like
most,
then again, right? Like as a business, we're not quite interested in building a Bored Ape style
the
commercial
point
rights
is not,
based
yeah, the
community,
point
right?
is not trying to identify like critiques of every single, or not trying to shit on every single project. It's like just
Oh,
like
for sure.
asking unwinding questions essentially. Like, okay,
Right.
why? Like, okay, why is that particular part interesting? Like, what are, so people are rallying around traits and like, okay, and that seems to be working. That's keeping a community alive for more than almost a whole year now, right? Which on the surface level, if you just explained it to someone who didn't know much about it, would be very
But then
confusing.
again, I think this goes all the way back to the whole
Hmm.
absurdity point.
Yeah, yeah.
Why are you trying to explain something in that way when it happens? Like it's like explaining 100th floor. It happened, and then if you try to explain it with like a one, well, if you explain it with an assumption of 1 + 1 = 2, but then what you're staring in front of you is equal to 3. It's not a very particularly productive way to manifest meaning why it equals to 3 when you already have like a very prejudiced opinion on why that doesn't work. And I think PFPs is like one of those weird absurd examples of just like it worked. It created a brand. There's like 3,000-4,000 holders. If you release something to that brand, immediately you have 3,000 to 4,000 fairly wealthy, pretty
Yeah,
much largely KYC people that you can sell to, right? And whatever
right.
you can manifest it, right? It's not like, oh, these traits. It's more like, shit, it happened. Let's go find meaning in it in the same kind of weird way you can absurdify like a Fidenza being 100 ETH, right? Like or whatever, right? Like
what? So I was gonna add what you're pointing out though, Ash, is kind of funny how people rally around these traits. Because I was thinking about it now, like in other real world collectible assets, what do people rally? Like, what kind of communities get formed? It'd be really funny if there was like, say, collectible cards, and there's Jersey Peaches called swatches, right? So it'd be really weird if there was like a
right.
swatch club
So
or a swatch DAO, right? So that's really unique to crypto.
well,
kind
I
of like,
think it's interesting, right? I guess in like say Yu-Gi-Oh, right? There is some amount of rallying around like archetypes, right? Like if you
Right.
play
That's right.
like dragons or whatever, or you play magicians focused kind of cards, or you play like a very quirky non-meta style kind of game, but like it's very like just like you identify with or whatever. I know a lot of folks when I was playing like certain TCGs, they build
Right.
decks almost around their personality.
yeah,
You're
Like,
right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right.
so the point I'm kind of like realizing in myself too is that like a critical component of like what makes art beautiful is the free component of it, right? It's like like any great art that's in the museum can still be viewed for free for the most part, or be talked about for free. The idea is transferred for free, right? Like Yves Klein making a blue painting and then people hearing about it,
So
like, what the fuck, right? And then going to it.
Ash, can I ask then?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it would affirm your statement. Then, would right-click save be a bug or a feature to you?
That's the feature. Feature.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I think you almost implied in that statement, right?
Last week's combo re-summarized.
Right.
And that's interesting too because when I watched anime, I didn't have a subscription to anything like whatever the fuck, right? We all torrented that shit. Or if I watched Yu-Gi-Oh, I didn't. We watched it on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. on WB, which is a free broadcast. And so like when I think about stuff like that, it's like the mythos, the legend, like you getting like as a kid, how would you get invested into something when you were like really like a really big fan of a game or a movie, whatever the fuck, right? You're watching. It was not because you were putting money into it. You're a kid, right? So like, what about it got you invested in it and like obsessed with it, right?
Attention is
it's everything else, right?
right. I was thinking like the attention you're giving it, quite simply, is probably the biggest driving factor. Like more important than money. Everyone says time is your most important currency, but I'd actually argue it's actually attention, because you can be doing something and wasting your time, but your attention. But think about like how attentive you are as a kid when you're playing Pokemon on your Game Boy or whatever it is that you're doing.
Right? You're not
Would there be an argument to be said that PFPs are taking that energy but giving it to like a older economic group that has money involved?
What I've realized is that basically because we're at this age where we have money to play with, we're missing the critical first layer, the foundational layer curiosity and fun, right? It's like the behavior of rallying around a trait is mostly an economic activity, and then you're making an excuse of social activity on top of it. To be honest, right? That's really what's going on.
Well,
We have like
I
spirit game. Like
wouldn't
really what's going
say
on is
that
that
like
like
Yu-Gi-Oh, right?
not
Like,
really though, right? Yu-Gi-Oh or
because
no,
you
Pokemon,
rally around archetypes not for economic reason. You rally around archetypes because you like an archetype.
yes, but in this case, mostly economic driven, right?
Wouldn't you
Well,
think
it's
though
a bit of
that
both. I think it's a bit of both.
No, but
Right.
it's one first, and then the other comes on top, right?
I agree that's the case actually more. Of the
You're
case.
right. So
And that's what I was. That was pretty much what I was
Right.
going to imply. Was just like
Yeah.
what happens is you get a laser eyes bored ape, you manifest your identity like ape father,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't think he chose the
Sure.
orange background. The orange background chose him, right? Like,
Exactly. Right, exactly. Right.
Yeah. There's another dimension out there where he's a pink background, right? No.
Right.
Exactly. And so I'm just trying to. I'm not saying as a critique to any all project deserves its own. Every
Right,
project
right.
deserves its own level of success, and making any project successful is hard enough by itself. So it's impressive that anyone could pull it off. But really, it's
Right,
it's
like it,
you have to unwind these ideas to figure out what's next, or like what is really interesting.
well, I think it's like a big right. It's like a balance of like what interests you and like keeping the mind open enough to like know that some of this is like very frivolous. So it's like I don't think a lot of people can predict some of these cases of this grandeur of success that some of these projects have been able to appreciate. Like to an extent, right? Like I feel like Tyler Hobbs, like QQL or whatever the heck, QOL, whatever it's that is
QQL.
ETH block art in a nutshell. But done in a way that was very, very exciting. And I thought it was I think there was a lot of people shitting on it for being like unoriginal, but I thought it was like as an execution, there's everything adequate about it. Like I didn't really
It was pretty cool. Yeah.
participate with it, but like it continues to reinforce in my head. It's just like as much as like, you can be like grandeurs of thinkers and try to do it, sometimes the go-to-market could be kind of out of your grasp. Like maybe in the sense that you're in a place of where you're mentally may not be, or you don't have the brand, or you don't have the followers to ship something and get the kind of reaction that you would anticipate. Because like ETH block art came out right about when Proof of Beauty came out. We were probably weeks, if not months apart. I remember when ETH block art only had like double-digit followers, and now people are like, well, QQL, whatever, right? But like, right, and to an extent, I feel like all these projects are all kind of doing the whole. We're gonna create a world, and your NFT snapshots into that world kind of storyline, or that metaphor. And I think that right now we kind of softly proven that's a pretty successful way to build a fun NFT experience where your PFP is only a small part of the grander experience.
Right.
And I think, right, like
this
is one of those things, Terraforms. Isn't Hash one of those best?
Yeah. What's QQ?
Like the world is the blockchain and you only own a part of that world of the blockchain. When I was kind of like personally even like brainstorming for like say a Bitcoin history. It'll be like it'll be cool if we actually found a way to make transactions almost map to three-dimensional space within an abstract world, right? And you owning transactions, you're owning like plots of this temporally increasing
volume
three-dimensional abstract world.
That's
I was like, that could be a really fun metaphor, right? Yeah, it'll be cool if like you can almost like get adjacent parcels of art, but in a hash context.
Nonce is kind of like, so you have x-axis of time, and then you can have depth of like nonce, right? That would give you.
Well, nonce. Okay, which like you're talking like difficulty nonce, or are you talking like transaction nonce and
transaction.
I think it works. I'm not gonna think too hard about it, but like.
Yeah. But that's a good point because I was kind of thinking about this week too of like, obviously like this entire space requires engineers and we have to be engineers, but there's a spectrum spectrum between I would say like engineer, and then the maybe manga artist is on the all the way other side of the spectrum of like least scalable,
like a purely like human driven visual art is what you're implying,
the
like
least
done
scalable
with a
thing.
hand.
Yeah, the least
Mhm.
scalable thing you could possibly do is literally like manga art, manga art for comic
Sure.
books, but it's literally page by page and like single time, like one time you draw. You only got one chance to draw it right, basically, because you have to do it in 1 week. So
Hmm.
that's interesting, right? Because the stress and scalability is of no concern, even though they have extreme level precision and talent.
For the manga side, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, the manga artists, the
Wait, so
drawers.
say that again. I just want to understand what you're
They're,
saying.
they're highly precise and technical in their skill set and artistic, yet stress and scalability is of no concern to their field, their entire industry, pretty much.
What do you mean by that last part?
I mean, literally, their turnaround is in 1 week, less than a week, basically, right? 1 to
I
2
would
weeks.
say that's probably a reflection of like a culmination of their experience, though, right? Like they probably have a very well equipped team, wouldn't you think?
No, I
Well,
don't
I
think.
also think manga of all the fine arts is designed to be confined within that speed. Right, you're
Yes,
not drawing,
they're
you're
making
not rendering with like a Rembrandt, like
yeah, they're making
paint, right?
optimizations for their
Right.
time limit, right? But they're still competing in a very, very dense industry, right? Where everyone's doing the
Right.
same. Everyone is trying to basically outcompete each other, right? I mean, it's the same competitive forcing
So,
see in any industry.
right.
But I'm thinking about that example because and plus it's unique to one culture that's extremely disciplined and focused, right? And so like there's many interesting things about that particular industry of how they're working and how they're thinking about what they're actually doing too, and how are they even creating the universe with that team size at that speed, coherently over years too. Is not easy, right?
Hmm. I'm sure
Yeah.
it's not easy.
It's a
Yeah,
very big.
it's not easy.
Mhm.
So there's
Right.
many factors around that thing that's is fascinating to me because any of the complaints we have today as engineers do not even exist as a vocabulary in their world.
Like what?
Hmm.
Pretty much anything to do with time, like spacing, we need breathability in terms of like getting workout, uh, scalability, uh, precision, or like I mean, basically like we approach problems obviously from an engineering perspective, like what's practical to pull off, what's a high quality thing that we can do within the
Well, I
time
think
period,
don't they do
right?
that too? They can't say I'm going to do this action sequence because it's cool. They're like, oh no, we got to tone it down. But there
Hmm.
still is. Well, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to take a step back. What's the point you're trying to make here? Like
Yeah, and
beyond the observation that they're.
I'm not making a clear point. I'm
Um,
just saying that drawing contrasting our fields is it could be very insightful. I think possibly in terms of how to work specifically towards a particular idea. Like a scoped idea, a small idea.
What size teams are we talking about that are putting out these like 1 week cadence mangas? Like, is it like a 6 person, 10 person team kind of thing? Like, what are we talking
I
about?
definitely know that those artists they could churn. They could.
Oh
Sure.
yeah,
They could. They're so familiar with their tooling. And,
right. That's what
Yeah.
I was thinking about when I was saying earlier about
Competing
years,
with-
like the expertise, a culmination of expertise, right? A good artist may be able to make something for you in 5, 10 minutes, but that's a reflection of 10 years of craft or 10,000 hours of practice, right? And
Yeah.
so I was thinking about when you're talking about some of these teams, I wonder how much of the success of putting out a project or a publication, whatever you want to call it, a new episode every week, has to do with just the sheer talent of the people they bring on board.
It's
I think it's
definitely has to do with that, right? But again, they're competing with a very, very dense industry, right? More so than I
Yeah.
would say us. Like the level of like in
well, how much
engineering,
of
I've
it
seen.
is how much of it is survivor bias, right? Like good talent making something somehow your IP was by the principles of whatever happened was successful, right? Because if it's like if you're arguing that they're industry is like very driven and also too very not haphazard, but it's very kind of like get it out kind of a philosophy. I feel like you're talking about a business that's probably pretty low margins to an extent.
Probably.
And it's more.
Yep.
It's probably one of those things where it's like, if it doesn't work, you just have to try again with another endeavor. And it's kind of like one of those. It feels kind of like a PFP, like a shitty PFP kind of world where it's like, we remember the good ones, but how much were laid on the side that, are metaphorically dead, right?
Right.
And I think it just takes a kind of a grit almost to say that, like, if it doesn't work, you move on and you try again.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that I find in some of these mediums of art. And
Well,
again,
it's not. Well, I don't know actually. So right, if you look at the entertainment industry specifically, like gaming or specifically we're talking about manga, right? It's like no, the level of iteration is not the same. It is like in the way that you're describing it, where you just let it go. It's like no, they're like once they commit to the idea, they're committed to an idea, right? That's
well,
the way
I think again, how much is that survivor bias? How many things that didn't work? Can you then list me projects that haven't done that long, because I think they exist.
No, there's a ton of them. I don't know.
So then I think it's a bit of a survivor bias. I think successful projects designed in that metaphor and their business model just tends to work very long. Right. That's what I'm implying. I'm saying that there's probably a lot of dead bodies out there that didn't do that. Right. Like I think it's a reflection of survival. Right. A reflection of that's how they work. I think if you survived, this is the effect of survival in a very cutthroat business style, where it's about your thing working at the speed that you can deliver it and still making enough money to keep maybe that adventure.
Right.
Because the feedback loop is very tight. On basically a bi-weekly, you get stats back on the performance, right? And you can keep a tight feedback loop. So, and then the contrast to that would be like, I know we're talking about a lot of different topics, but this is like I feel essential for us to work through though. So like, but look at like gaming industry, right? They have to put huge investment into it. Pretty much no certainty of it working properly, right? Like Anthem is a best failure.
Would that be a reflection of the medium, right? Like it's harder to make a game than like a manga story.
Yeah.
Let's see size of industry as well, right? Like the gaming industry is probably
massive, right?
Probably $1 trillion industry. Manga's like a $26 billion industry,
So I guess then, I mean, I'm for myself personally, I do find anything that's extremely high risk as being the admirable thing to pursue, right?
Which I like to think every business has its risk parameterization.
Yeah.
Now, to measure against each other is like which one is high risk. It's kind of more up to personal values, I think, to measure. Like, is deploying $400 million to build a game risky to you, or if it's not your money, right? And your business's money that you just had to delegate, or is spending weeks and weeks building something that you're really passionate about but doesn't work in a year risky. Like I think it's a matter of taste, I think, and I know that maybe for somebody who's a little bit more interested in the craft and the artistry, one sounds a lot more riskier than the other. Like if I just have to deploy somebody's money, like I'm gonna be honest, if it doesn't work out, I sleep that night fine. Which is maybe why I don't do that for a living, but
right,
because it just doesn't tickle me, right? But then so right, which I think it's a good thing that we have to do, right? To look at the artistry and craft of other industries.
Yeah, even for the game developers, it's not just a matter of putting money down, right? The people working on it, it's like you're not going to get a good game unless you're able to get the whole team of 100 people plus bought in to making this a great game, which is itself an investment. Do you see what I'm saying? Like that's what I see as high risk. How do you convince that many people to work on an idea? Very difficult, very, very difficult, very risky.
Well, I have to think about that one.
It's not just a matter of money, right? It's like paying 100+ people.
Well, if you're paying me, whatever, I'll work on it if you pay me. right? Like it's not hard to convince me
I don't see
to
this.
work on
It's
Halo
never,
6. If you say,
but
hey,
it's
here's
just never,
140K salary, right?
it doesn't matter how much you pay someone, right? I really don't think it's not a one-to-one thing. You need to be able to convince someone that this is worth working on, right? It's not a matter of money for most things, I think.
Well, I think that's a privilege.
Yeah.
I think that's
Right.
a privilege
I think especially
for
for
most
creative.
people. That's like a 1% of a 1% privilege in our real world. I think most people don't get that opportunity to choose.
I mean, okay, maybe for app development, but for game development, you really think you can cut corners like that? I don't think so, man. Like, I really don't think so. How are you going to convince someone to put?
So we're going to confine it to game development.
Yeah. Let's say confine it to game.
I do know of folks. This is very anecdotal. I'm not trying to disargue. This is anecdotal at best. I know folks who work at Candy Crush, and they describe it as one of the most soulless jobs ever.
Okay, all right, Candy Crush.
Okay. But then again, it's Candy Crush, right?
Yeah.
But then say if somebody's working, like I'd be very surprised if you were to say go to like 343 Industries and you like talk to like a dev there, not a contractor, a dev.
Yeah.
And say, do you like what you do? And are you a passionate Halo fan? I think you'd find most of them saying like, I like
probably.
this. But then what if say like I go to that guy and say, hey, I'm gonna pay you a little bit more and I'm gonna make you work on Destiny. And they're like, well, I like games. I think they
okay.
A lot of people did do that actually. Yeah.
Right? Like
yeah.
And they probably just jumped ship, right? And like I say that as somebody who's like very like I thought about this in the sense of like what games I like I really am a big fan of like StarCraft, the strategy game, and it's a very distinctive style of flared strategy, and I wonder what happens because there's going to come a day where there's going to be a better strategy game, right? And I know that the better strategy game, there's companies doing that, and they are all like ex-StarCraft developers, so they like know their shit, kind of a thing. But I feel like all their argumentation was just like, we want to build what we are interested in, and I think it's like maybe not the IP or whatever, but maybe as you kind of implied, maybe the grandeur of what kind of game design interests you, and they pursued that direction generally, right? It doesn't have to be an IP. It could be if you like making like fantasy or sci-fi driven FPS titles, there's quite a few places you could work. I feel like filling that quota up.
Sure.
Hell, you could even go to like DICE and not DICE, but like EA and make like Star Wars Battlefront.
The simple point I was making is that it should not be underrated how difficult it is to align like a very large team on a creative endeavor, which is unlike most businesses if you think about it, right? Most businesses are hard.
What do you mean by different here?
Because most businesses are are really hard engineering problems that are towards a practical, like a very not that there's not elements of that in game building, right? There's many technical problems those guys have to solve. I'm talking about like, all right, payment processing, right? Just like a very clear thing we're trying to optimize. We just need to get payments to the door, right? Like nothing is beyond really that. Like at the end of the day,
right.
But when you're aligning 100+ people in a creative endeavor from 0 to 1, that's an
challenge.
That's 10 times more difficult, in my opinion.
Yet again, though, the person who runs a payment processing company might see the way they're doing their business as like, my mission is to help the people who don't have access to traditional payment rails have more access. So they might have a mission that is
how I convince myself, right? It's like you're convincing yourself at the end of the day, right? That's all you're doing, really.
Sure. So, I was just thinking with respect to like say the mission of each individual company is going to attract people who more or less see value in that mission. And if they don't, they should probably go work somewhere else, right? But
you're gonna say, if they have the opportunity to work somewhere else.
If they do. And actually on that note too, even with respect to the size of the anime or manga industry, like let's think about how small that industry is. It's big, but like compared to say gaming, and how many people would love to work in that industry. I bet you it's very cutthroat to get a job in that industry. So it would make sense that
crappy, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'd imagine that a certain type of personality would have to qualify, and that type of personality would probably fit that 1 week launch cadence because of the nature of the industry, where gaming seems to have a lot more of a relaxed nature to it. Bungie or Microsoft will take, no shame in pushing a release back 6 months, even if it's a simple in-game mechanic, right? There's a lot more of a relaxed attitude to it.
But and that's probably a lot more money, and they just need to get the return.
Exactly. Right? A lot more money, a lot more room to bring in more talent, and a lot of that talent is underutilized because there's so much talent being brought onto a lot of these big companies, where I would imagine, as Ash was saying, that talent you're bringing into an anime, you're probably utilizing a lot of that talent because of the pressure of the industry, right?
Right. I do. Yeah.
Anyways,
It's like
yeah,
I think a utilization ratio is a lot
right,
better, especially I think if it's like an Asian, like a company based in Asian cultures where they
big
have that kind
time.
of
Yep.
work-life relationship. If it's like a more like Americanized style venture, I do think you see that work-life balance in massive quotes, air quotes here, that has to be communicated. But this whole conversation really reminds me of there's this great YouTube documentary. It's a behind the
Mhm.
scenes of making God of War,
Oh, yeah.
the latest God of War,
Yeah,
and
I
it
think I
just kind
saw
of
that.
follows. It
Yeah.
just follows the, I guess the director,
Creative
whoever
director.
leads the game,
Yeah.
creative
Yeah.
director, and just from inception to completion, the
These are
challenges he had to
fascinating-
deal with, and that was
they're
really
fascinating
interesting.
Oh,
stories, right?
interesting.
They're fascinating people, fascinating stories about like them working with a team. I mean, every part of it is kind of like mind blowing.
Yeah, like my first
Mhm.
impression was like Corey, that dude, he's an absolute weirdo, and I love it.
Yeah.
And like
Mhm.
as a creative director, he's a weird dude, and I think that it takes a weird dude to do the craft of creating a God of War, right, and reimagining that IP in the way that
You got to get people
Totally.
to buy into your weirdness, not just simply lay out things to do. You got to get people to align with you, like your whole team, right, with the vibe of what you're feeling and thinking. So like that is it's quite a challenge.
I'd imagine
to
with
an
him. Go
to
ahead.
an extent of this, would this be like the Jobs like reality distortion field effect?
Yeah,
That like
and
Jobs could walk in and convince you the Macintosh is gonna like change the world radically.
you need that, right? You need that. That's and bringing that back to like the project base, right? It's like that's why I think like I'm should be designed in the future. It need like for some reason the emphasis right now is very much on the buyer side, the community side, towards injecting value and generating value into the project. To me, that's the least interesting part. It's always from the creator side that's interesting because that's where all the magic happens.
I think it's like a youthfulness of this industry, kind of
Yeah.
like what you implied before that there was going to be like this whole really avant-garde movement, like the internet eras. I think we're at a place where money isn't willing to deploy in that way fully, right? Like we're not in a place where like
Mm.
there's companies out there that's willing to say, "Hey, what are you doing with your IP?" It's like, I just want to put wild ass shit, and like, okay, here's $10 million, go do it, right?
Right.
Blank check. I think they're more willing to fund the Zukis, the more traditional buyer side, as you implied.
Yeah.
But I think if it gets a little bit more sophisticated, there could be
Mhm.
probably production teams out there, almost kind of like maybe how Hollywood funds teams.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, you're a director. We may even have an IP that we want you to direct, or you have your own IP. Have fun, go crazy with it. We may have some guidelines, but this is your piece, right? Like, we'll give you the money to get your piece done, right?
Yeah.
I think we're a little bit further out from that.
There'll be genres,
Yeah.
you know, like shonen is to anime. It's like, all right, go make something in that genre. You know, it's like
Right.
And I think that's why we always feel like the black sheep in this world, right? As a studio, because we are very creator centric, and I think it's also in part realized because of our company's incentive mechanics, right? Like we aren't here to grow somebody else's $5 million into 50 million into 100 million. That's just not I don't have any responsibility in that way,
Mhm.
right? And I think that allows us that privilege to even have a conversation like this and feel very strongly that creator side creating is very valuable and two, I think, very underserved in this market, in the crypto.
yeah, but it's also the nature of things, right? Because it's permanent. Once you upload the contract, it's there. There's a cost to doing everything, right? Every little thing is a cost, and there's permanence,
Yeah.
and that's the nature of the genre. As we figure out how to expand things, like that's I think our journey will basically be figuring out how do we expand beyond that in terms of okay, what is the tokens? Like maybe it's not even all the metadata is on the token. Maybe not
Right.
even all is on there. You know, that
Sure.
would be weird.
You know, guys, I've been thinking, like, I wonder if there is a cryptocurrency brand or IP yet that has successfully built what you could, by actual industry standards, call a large community. It's like if you have a 10,000 token set and that's the size of your community, assuming there's going to be other people who are fans that don't own a token too. But let's say that there's 100,000 Azuki fans out there, right? Like, what is the actual size of some of these IPs? Like, how many people are really involved in them? Because compared to
So that's where the
real world projects,
airdrop. That's
yeah,
where the airdrop mechanic happens.
right.
If that's the pure business pragmatics of it. Was
Well, how are you expanding it though? You're just airdropping to the existing people, and then they offload it.
and
to
then they dump it on the market.
They dump it on new people.
Right.
Yeah.
But they usually dump it at a cheaper price. That's always how it works. It's
Yeah,
you have to play that balance of like giving back, but then giving to the new, right? Like
Yeah.
it's economic price tiering, but then again, I see it as a balance of like, do you need more users or do you want the quality users?
right.
That has some balance to be in mind. But I think all PFPs, if you're smart enough about your own health of your environment, you need to always be able to grow the community. So right, like when Azuki did their beans airdrop, Azuki was like a 30 ETH floor, and 30 ETH floor is pretty much out of the reach of like
most people,
99% of the people.
Yeah.
So they're like, yeah, whatever, let's just go drop a beans, which is 20,000, double the size of 10K, right? And 20,000, and they dropped it out, and it was about like half an ETH for a while, right? And half an ETH was like exit liquidity for a lot of folks. They got free money, but for half an ETH to join the community that is Azuki, I guess that's a better pricing tier, and that's, I think, a very pragmatic business decision. Now, I think, are they gonna do another airdrop?
Right, and that's what I'm thinking. Like, how do you get it beyond that? Because Mutant Apes did the same thing. How do you get it beyond 30,000 people? How do you actually make this community large and valuable? Because you got to think about how much money is going to come. Obviously, the people who hold Azuki, some of them are going to be pretty wealthy. Some of them might have just got lucky. But I keep thinking, like, what is the actual value and the size of the value of this IP? Or the largest IPs in crypto compared to real world IPs, or I'm just saying real world money off the chain. They're small. They're very small and obviously very early, right? But I am curious, how are they going to bring more people in and grow this base? Obviously, if, say, they went and created their own anime or manga series and put that out and started capturing new users by selling consumer products, that would be one way. But if it's strictly tokenized right now and based on that token experience, I really question how many projects can actually build a brand.
I think not many, right? I think that's
it comes
that's
down
like
to
the $1 billion question.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right.
You have to give, like, do stuff the old fashioned way, which is everything before this time period was given away for free and then retroactively figured out how to make money, right? It's like, we can't forget that. It's like, I mean, who was making the browser games and what purpose? It's not like they were getting ad revenue realistically, right? How much ad revenue do you think they were actually getting?
Well, enough to make them want to make another game.
Well, yeah.
Right. Which
I don't know, really. I don't know. Like, to me,
well,
it's like
I don't think a lot of people just make those games for free.
I think
they made enough to justify the artistry, which is not my way of saying it was enough money to feed and pay the rent, but there was enough to justify the artistry.
No, I don't think it's all about popularity, right? It's like that is enough to fuel someone to make another game, not making money. Do you see what I'm saying?
So popularity just meaning there's a growing community.
Users, yeah, just users.
Right.
Basically. Right.
And so in your case, Dave, where they make another game, that could be a play, kind of like dropping an airdrop to bring in more users. We don't have the capability to, quote unquote, expand to the size we want to. So we're going to make another game to hopefully bring in more users. And maybe this game becomes more successful in the last game and it catches. And now we have a growing large community. But
yeah, it's just a matter of curiosity, right? It's just like, all right, I guess to someone with a low friction, like for someone online, you want to reduce the friction and make them curious for whatever experience you created, right? So one, removing money and any part of that is going to create high friction, and then you're coming up with like a bunch of economic reasons of why you're even doing this interaction if you involve money in there, right? Which is everything in NFTs involves money. So my question is Azuki has sitting on $50 million It's October in
Oh, they're sitting
2026.
on more probably.
Yeah,
Probably. Yeah.
way more than that. So, and it's October in 2022, right? And you're saying they're doing things at a decent cadence, which is probably true. But then how hard could it be to make a browser game? They could have done it with beans. How hard could it be? People used to do it time back in the day,
so
right?
I personally never liked the argument that why didn't it do it is because it was easy. It clearly isn't easy. Because if it were easy, they would have done it. Kind of a thing. There's like, I.
No, not really. I don't think that's why. It's because there's no direct.
Well,
there's
then
no,
why aren't we building a browser game?
Or we'd see
Because
more
it's
of
not
them,
easy,
right?
right? It's not easy. It's a strategy decision, right? It's clearly it doesn't fit their concerns right now. Is more than anything else, right? And
yeah.
right.
So okay, when I say easy, is I mean within the constraints of their resources. Let's like
Fair
within
enough.
Right, so I think it's just like they're just not concerned about it. That's it, right? Like that's why they didn't build a marketplace. It's just not their goal right now. Whatever that is, right? Like, and we're not in their boardroom, right? So
that's a mistake, right? It's like, I think it's very much
well, how do you know it's a mistake yet?
Right.
By what metric are we measuring the failure of it? Right? I don't know. I'm not here gonna make any gamble on saying a mistake or not to make it.
I'm saying it as a mistake from my perspective, from purely my perspective of what is released so far, right? It's like they made a collector's page, and like if the collector's page, like the extent of impressiveness is like the fact that they have like badges and then show the full version of the art.
Why do you think it's a mistake? I'd take a very neutral position.
So why not? Because
if PFP does make a game that does really work, congrats. I want to learn, right? Like Cool Cats is making kind of like a Flash game in their Cool Cats world. It's kind of a flop, to be honest, right now. They spent all their money on it, doesn't work because I don't think anybody really cared, to be honest. They airdropped a secondary PFP thing to really lower the barrier. I think you could even go in without a PFP. I don't know. Like to me, it's just like I'm dumb enough to not know what exactly the future of these roadmaps and like what is this qualifying success. And I think if you were to ask Azuki or even the Yuga Labs like upper, I think they're all just like shooting in the dark, to be honest.
Well,
they're being pretty conservative.
You need to be able to attract users organically without a monetary incentive, and then the monetary whatever token.
That's a huge thesis.
That needs to be a thing.
I think that thesis.
Yes.
Can be not everybody agrees with.
Yes.
In the PFP world.
Yeah, not everybody agrees with that, but that's
your hill to die on. I would argue.
Yeah.
Right. If that wasn't needed to grow whatever we define as successful is like I don't know what is success defined for Mizuki founders, right? I frequently never, like they don't really quite they imply it, but they don't really give you observable layers to it. So to that point, I don't know. It's just like it's a very business running a business. I can't. I just don't feel like we should be opinionated about how they.
Why wouldn't you be opinionated? We need to be opinionated to create a coherent direction. Otherwise, you're kind of just.
Well, I don't think creating a game is a full on answer to.
Yeah, well, then
answer to the woes of the problem, right?
It comes down to defining what you defining our whatever the shared vision of game is, right? It's like, yeah, I remember one particular game like on Neopets that like it could be barely defined as a game. You're basically it's a 2D. Yes, it's a game, as in you move around with arrow keys and you're kind of exploring this Neopets world. And I was playing it because I just wanted to see what the map looked like. And then like you have to like encounter some like enemies and like. It had game elements, but you're not doing anything. There's no save. There's not even a save state, really. You're literally just kind of walking around exploring this Neopets 2D world. And what's in the most simplistic sense, they could have easily done that in Mizuki. And they're basically what they're doing is they're simply laying out a 2D world to explore. Right?
Well, when I think about the position they're in terms of a business, if they have $100 million and say they have $100 million and they have talent and they have a community, I would think that they're just trying to identify the correct opportunity to scale. Like they're not going to go pour their eggs into a bunch of little baskets. They're thinking about scaling. And you got to think when you have that kind of capital, you're not going to waste your money and you're not going to spread yourself too thin. And so you got to think they're probably not alluding to the opportunity that they've identified because it's an opportunity they're going to go pursue. At least that's how I would imagine it if they have a proper business strategy. And I'm sure they do. They're sitting on $100 million.
I think it's just
And they raised 50 million.
Yeah,
right,
right. So they raised it on a strategy.
Exactly. And they had to put forward a plan, and they had to have good fundamentals, and they had to have a vision for it. And I keep thinking, whatever it is that Ash is trying to allude to, that maybe they could have done more, or whatever it is that you're expecting probably hasn't come yet. Right.
Yeah. It's risky.
Well, and also to be fair, like, will Azuki make a game? I think even in one of the roadmaps, they hinted at something.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they need to make a game that blows your mind. That's part of risk. Right? Part of risk is putting out things that may not necessarily blow your mind, but just are an intriguing idea to maybe take you to the next step or attract a specific user. You don't really know what's going to happen, right? To me, it's all about that. What level of risk are you taking? And I don't see projects really taking risk.
Well,
if we're gonna make a game, we're gonna go like full into making like a high def game.
Well, then you're just talking about Yuga Labs, then, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
So do you think that is a successful story?
No.
Didn't you just argue against yourself?
No, I'm not saying that going high fidelity is necessarily more or
so
less.
So then that's what Azuki's doing. They're taking the temperamental, very conservative way of creating a metaversal experience.
Yeah,
right?
Very conservative. And then Yuga is not necessarily saying, I'm not saying that's risky either. Right.
Well, it's a lot of money.
Yeah. I was going to add to, like, if we're going to step back and analyze the risk environment in terms of like capital deployment, wouldn't you think that obviously the risk environment is completely different than it was 6 months, even a year ago. Right. And so I would feel like it's less risky in some regards today for this company to really think out their actions, given that the market is moving a little slower. There's less competitors. They're well capitalized. They have a brand that stands out. Like, there's less risks of them succeeding today because they stand out already as a top competitor. But they have to really think about how they're going to scale and capitalize on whatever the next bull cycle is, right? So I would imagine in terms of risk, they're looking at it in context to that. I could be completely wrong, but
that's my hunch, to be honest, with Azuki's actions. Is I think they take on that perspective that a bad decision will be more costly than not doing it.
Exactly.
Because of their size and scale and whatever. And from my very anecdotal experiences with folks that I know that are closer to that community, that certainly is the case. But then, you were to talk to some of those folks, they are oozing with crazy experimental concepts that are really exciting and things that they have soft pitched to their community or even to other creators within it. Say, hey, is this something that can work out or whatever? I know that they are of that mind, but it's clear that they're like, if we bungle this, we really bungle it. And I think they're playing a little bit more like kind of just like a startup would.
Completely agree.
At their size, right?
Right.
Community is going to be naturally risk averse, right? Like that's also the thing is like largely with a project that's largely supported by a strong community, which is basically like people rallying around PFPs, right? It's like that's going to make you even more conservative because every little thing is questioned and checked, right? It's basically everything's designed by committee for the most part.
What I keep thinking. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were done.
No, nothing. I mean, that's pretty much it. Like that's what the collector's page to me is very like. Okay, this is like fan service essentially. Like
right.
Yeah.
Risk is like a combination of brute force and ideas that don't make sense. That's what risky to me is.
I keep thinking that like one of the biggest risks here for the Azuki team is in fact not what it can do for its 10,000, 30,000 collectors. How are they going to bring in the millions of people that are eventually going to use Ethereum? How are they going to use not even just them? How are they going to bring in more people? I would think the biggest risk is that they don't. Right. And so I would imagine that whatever product it is that they're building or whatever it is they're building around their brand, it's going to be able to reach more people, or at least it should, because it brings down the risk profile of succeeding as a business. But I would imagine that is their biggest risk, that they fail to bring in the masses or maybe not even just that, but that their 30,000 strong community doesn't bring in the masses, that they do not rally them as such to want to bring in more excitement. it's a little tricky, obviously, because
Seems
they
like the
can play
most
it a few different
obvious,
ways. But
the
But
easiest
that's
thing.
where like right isn't like the whole right click save is a feature, not a bug kind of a
I mean, yeah,
it is a feature.
quotation, right? Like it's
I'm
like I don't own
thinking,
Supreme,
yep,
but I know what a Supreme is and I know what it represents to people,
right,
and
right?
Cyberpunk Edge Runners
yeah.
is getting quite the fanfare on Netflix. The most recent
Oh yeah.
spin-off anime.
Mhm.
So if Izuki was able to land a Netflix series, even if it was 6
I mean, that would be
episodes,
huge, man.
that would
That
explode
would
the
be
entire
huge.
thing next level, right? And
That would
that
be big for the whole space, you know?
exactly what I mean by giving something for free. That's exactly what
Yeah,
I think, right? Because that's a low margin. How much money do you think they're making off that? Basically nothing, right? It's just
yeah.
that it's just like it's just like you're getting into the zeitgeist and you're getting in front of people. Um,
Wouldn't each movie technically have that principle? Like, you put
yeah,
out the movie to sell DVDs and to sell merch around that movie. I'm sure you wanna do well in the box office and you want the movie to perform, but I'm sure that, when you put out a movie, you put out this community because 'cause you're building community around a movie, you're gonna sell merch. When they
I don't
make
know.
Hello Kitty, they're not concerned about Hello Kitty reaching the masses, they're concerned about Hello Kitty
I think
dolls, and you
it's
know what I mean? Shit like that.
it's a completely different frame of mind. I think we have to like for entertainment space. Like I don't think like none of those things are good business decisions. Like how could it be? Like if we were sitting there, it wouldn't make sense, right? Why would you
For
invest
what?
in something? And almost any entertainment, like a producer, the producer is involved in the
Well,
show.
that seems very antithetical in my eyes
Yeah,
because it's
Why?
happening.
It is happening. That's
People
what I'm saying.
are giving a lot of money. So why is that illogical? Because it's happening.
Are they making a lot
And
of money?
clearly it's logical
But
enough
we don't
for a
really know.
very big industry to exist, right?
We don't
I
really know.
mean,
We don't know how much money each movie makes. We don't really know, right? Or each show on
Well,
Netflix.
it's clearly making enough
yeah.
to make Warner Brothers and all these things exist, right?
I'm sure that
What
it's very difficult to like each production is going to obviously have a different way of bringing in money, right? It's going to obviously depend on what your brand's built around, like the pillars of your brand. Does your brand have comic books like Marvel? Is putting out a Marvel movie going to push more of certain product? Whatever, I don't know, but it's going to depend on the pillars of the brand. When I think about Azuki, it would be within their interests, absolutely, to do what you were saying, put out like a six-part series or something, make no money on it as a means of propelling their brand forward and bringing others
which
in.
they kind of are, and I'm saying
Mhm,
they are trending in that direction. I think as
mm,
we've all kind of alluded to, I think it's like that's their big head scratcher, and I would even argue that's Yuga Labs' biggest head scratcher as well. Um, is yeah, like I guess how do you give free but not free but free experiences? And what I mean by not free, it's engaging in a way that activates people in a way that may lead into whatever your activation flow is, right?
mhm,
Because like I think like if you were to make say like LOL making a anime 3D anime whatever that gets more players and that gets more buyers or whatever in-game content that makes
yeah,
their brand more valuable, that makes their esports community stronger, makes that IP of the esports LOL thing valuable as well, right? Like
and then
so I
there's the
guess yeah,
whole
I think
yeah,
I think it would be fine. I would be surprised if Suzuki's not thinking about that in the long run, or even the short
mhm,
midterm run. They're probably even experimenting with their artists, like creating short, you know, audio visual mediums of their product of their brand. Because
hmm,
and also for them, I think they've seen enough organic behavior where like holders are doing that with their own IP, with their own PFPs, that I feel like everybody's like almost trying to manifest it, and Azuki's like, I think Azuki knows. I think like it'll be
mhm,
dumb. They'll be very blind if they don't if they don't know that they should be making content like that, like web
yeah.
series or whatever series, however
Yeah.
they want to do it. I know
It's
that
almost
team is a little bit more Web3. They're Web3 lovers. They do a lot of very
right,
Web3 experimental shit. So they probably have their own web series
right,
spin on
right.
it. But
Wouldn't you think, or wouldn't you guys agree that it's almost like two different markets? Like you have the market that you want to reach outside of NFT land, where you want people to be a fan of your shit and maybe be a fan of it, irrelevant of whether it's on the blockchain or not. People may not know it. Like you want people to love Azuki for it being Azuki, but then you have holders who love it for being an NFT that perhaps is more blockchainy part of the crypto world. And I would feel like for Azuki or any one of these IPs to truly have what we might consider success on a large scale, they'd have to get the product out there in a way such that the people who are consuming that or whatever it is, they're like, oh my God, this started as an NFT. That's crazy. And the original 30,000 people can embellish in that. Because I kind of imagine, when blockchain really reaches the masses, it's going to be seamless to the point where the products we use, well, it's not going to matter whether or not they're on a blockchain. They will be, and you're not going to know it, or perhaps it's just going to be irrelevant of it.
Well, right, like Azuki's, if you look at their advisor core, I
Mhm.
think that's like where you can imply that, because like I remember on their advisor board, there's also like the guy who created Hello Kitty is on their board of advisors.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
Yes, exactly.
Clearly, they're mindful of that.
And that's where I was going with that earlier. Yeah.
Right. Like that's what they're thinking. Right. It's like, at this point, like they got their super fans, the guys and gals who hold their Azukis,
Mhm.
but now they're solving the other problem, where it's like, how do you get to the masses? Where it's like, you start a YouTube brand, you do the other way around, right? Like,
right, it's totally different. And we were talking about like organic growth, like the organic growth of two communities, one token holders who have like a financial incentive, the other you're trying to basically get people to give you your time. And so it's different in my mind, the two different marketplaces and how they work. You're competing
and I
for
think
attention in one
that's
place.
that's gonna make or break an IP, right? Like
Big time. That's why I
right.
think it's their biggest risk, right?
My
For every
question is,
PFP, right?
or
Mhm.
or to come from the Azuki's perspective, or I guess even Chiro Labs perspective, they have a really good brand to work with Azuki's. Like that can spin off into like an anime universe or whatever, right? But if they went down that direction, then they're an anime company they're an anime company at that point, right? They're not
Sure.
valued.
I think that's what they
would
know themselves.
would be
That's
very
kind of what I'm
secretly
emphasizing
as.
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then I mean, I guess the price
They say they're like a Web3 brand, which is their way of saying like, we're not a development shop, we're not this or
Yeah.
that. I don't even think if you were to ask them, I think when they say Web3 brand, I really think they're saying like Web 2.4999999.
so
Like they
it would be
accidentally rounded it up to 3.
It's kind
Like,
of funny. It's like I'm an internet brand. I'm a social brand. It just seems like a weird way to distinguish yourself that in the future isn't going to matter. If you're a brand and you're a successful brand, you're a brand. It's not going to matter whether or not you're an NFT company or you're a non-NFT company. If you're a brand that succeeds, you're a brand. And I keep thinking like if we distinguish ourselves, I'm a Web3 brand. It might matter today, but I keep thinking that's not going to matter in the future.
What's the reason for them not being very clear about the long-term goal? Like, because what I'm basically saying is, isn't it easy to become distracted?
Like clear publicly or internally?
Yeah.
Publicly. So, like, why wouldn't it be
Competitors?
Competitors, yeah.
Yeah.
Why though? There's nothing to compete though with.
There's a massive threat in the market, right? If other companies recognize their strategy, they can thwart their strategy, especially when the size of the market is the size it is. I mean, you got to look at one whale could probably come in and absolutely destroy Azuki if they wanted to, right? You got to think about it, right?
Well, they have money though, right? That's what I'm saying. Like if their intention is that we're gonna use this character design, and
well, it's kind of like us, right? We don't tell everybody what we're doing in part because it gives us the flexibility to change as well, right? I think you add all the reasons.
Sure, yeah.
I think it's better to keep your poker cards closer and not reveal that you have pocket aces.
Well, I wonder how much do they care about because at this point the token price or pretty much anything to do with a token should be completely irrelevant to them, right? They have their brand, they have their anime assets, they have their team, their really, really solid team of artists. They can go full tilt into that direction and focus on getting the Netflix deal, right?
Yeah,
I think they're thinking about it again. I think they're smart enough to think about it. They're finding that balance of like not burning your own community right now, but then engaging and activating them such that they're still loyal as they're making this kind of spreading the wings movement, if you will. And that is challenging in itself. It can be very hard to not feel like you're ditching your old community because
but isn't it
very emotionally fragile?
You from a business perspective, you'd want to watch your price though, because if you're price floor creators, the community will probably respond accordingly. right? So you have an incentive to at least try to uphold some price floor mechanics because you do not want your community to head in that direction. At least that's what I would imagine. Maybe I'm wrong.
So, but that's
Right. Well,
why
I do think they track it, but I think they have the benefit that they don't need to spend hours finding solutions to it because they've reached that like blue
equilibrium.
chippy status
Yeah.
Mhm.
where the focus should just be on like building free-ish experiences, and the floor price hopefully one day will track against that price of that work, right?
Mm.
Instead of saying like, let's go build a burning experience so we can artificially induce floor price movement, right, or whatever. They're capitalized enough; they don't need the money, and two, that just seems like a distraction for them more than anything else.
Maybe we'll
Right.
get
Right.
to Christmas time, like a big announcement from them. That'll be interesting. I would
That'd
hope
be cool.
for. But
Well, if you like peruse their community, like their Discord, where like their team members are there, and you peruse their website, they drop a lot of like ambiguous hints of things that they're interested in. So it's like
Hmm.
hard. It's not impossible to guess what they're thinking, but they're close to their chest. Which if I were to run something of that size and scale, I'd be close to my chest as well. I feel like that's a very
Right.
pragmatic way to play your cards right now when the answer in front of you is not very clear, so you need to figure it out as one of the kind of like the first folks trailblazing in that certain direction,
Right.
and you got probably in front of them they probably only have Yuga Labs to learn from, right? And
Hmm.
Yuga Labs is going in such a fundamentally different direction than Azuki. I'd say some of that data isn't even that quite useful
Right.
beyond saying don't
it's
do
weird.
that.
Wouldn't
They're
it be?
you know?
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, it's just weird to me that there's a lot of focus on the usage of the word brand and not
Right.
universe, like a
Well,
story.
right,
I think
right.
brand just is. I think maybe they just think of it. I
They're
think
big
brand
difference.
just sounds better on
Worse.
Twitter. I don't know.
Really? Feels worse
Well,
to me.
if we were to look at it like I was saying before, if a brand is what people say it is, your brand matters a lot. Because if you don't tell people what your company is, people are going to tell you what it is. You want to kind of put out what you want people to believe your brand is, so that you can at least control some of the narrative, right? I would imagine that when you know a lot of these quote unquote Web3 brands, I would think, Dave, that they're actually able to draw more from, like, for example, I would imagine Azuki's able to draw more from some traditional case studies in addition to Yuga, because they're scaling that, as we were talking about earlier, that organic IP, trying to reach the masses per se, trying to make Azuki a world, or you know what I mean, outside of the blockchain. I guess I'm thinking, try to make it something real in the same sense that, you know, like I could see it having the same I don't know, caricature is like, say you would talk about Naruto, like you would love to be able to talk about Azuki as a brand that exists in fullness outside of the blockchain. So it has its world, that organic component reaching that. I would only imagine that they're looking at traditional branding firms, brand strategies, case studies.
Yeah, and I think the people they have on their team is a reflection that Web3 is silent.
It's maybe like
almost in their word Web3 brand.
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds like all these major blue chips like Doodles, Cool Cats, and possibly, hopefully not Azuki, but are kind of going the Hello Kitty path or Mickey Mouse path where they don't exist. They're truly brands. They're not universes. Do you see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Hello Kitty is not a universe. It's a brand, right? And that's a very superficial level of creativeness to me personally.
What do you mean it's not can it be both? Like it's a universe built around a brand being an identifier. The universe of Hello Kitty.
I'm using those two examples, like Hello Kitty, specifically Hello Kitty, as being Hello Kitty is very specifically absent of a universe.
Is it? I don't.
I actually don't know. I was going to say maybe it does. Maybe it does have a big universe.
I don't. Yeah, maybe we just don't know about it, right?
No, I'm sure they're just shit. Like we can do some like people. Like hold on a second, but I would be surprised It's a
I'd be
very
Right. I think if you're trying to
Yeah.
measure it with artistry, obviously, like, I think in an artistic sense, you don't raise 50 million selling it on art, right? I'm just like, we're just gonna be artistically creative. I think you raise 50 million with the strategy, say we're gonna become a
We're
very
a business.
commercializable, right,
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
So
I feel like that gets mixed up when you put Web3 in there for some reason. Like people almost forget that these IPs aren't businesses or potential commercial plays,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yeah,
almost
it's
like
like-
there's this anti sentiment to that today too.
Yeah,
in the
it's
crypto
kind of fucked
space.
up. You would think with a large investment, it should be a walk in the park to build out very robust and fleshed out universes.
well, again,
Obviously not. It's difficult.
it just takes time.
It's
Right.
time.
I feel like we have this conversation in a year from now. We maybe be just like sitting here, just like, oh shit, they did it, right? They just needed.
I think
a
you're
year.
right.
Like,
That'd be great. Yeah. But I'm just saying, it's like you didn't like most of these things that are massive, or like the shonens didn't need that $50 million investment. They just did it. It was like a high risk, month to month thing.
Well, perhaps you'll see why they needed the $50 million, though. That's what I keep thinking. Like, show me why you needed the 50 million, because there should be like, for one, you got to be able to raise 50 million, and there got to be a pretty damn compelling reason, right?
I don't know, man. It's because it sounds to me like if you just say Hello Kitty, you can get $50 million. I don't know.
Hello Kitty today, but Azuki's not Hello Kitty. Azuki's like 10,000 kids in the blockchain.
If your pitch is like we're going for that level of superficial brand where it's just a recognizable artifact that it can exist in almost infinite variations, which is what Hello Kitty is. It's just an image, just a shape of an image. Mickey Mouse is just a shape of an image, right? And it can exist in infinite context. If that's a sellable, that's a juicy sellable thing to an investor. That's $50 million worth. Is that creatively juicy?
I hear what you're trying to say now. Yeah,
different, right?
Right. But I guess that's really up to interpretation, right? Like how could we know if Mickey Mouse, when it was first drawn, is valuable, or if when Thor was first conceptualized in a Marvel context, that was going to be as big as it became. Like it's really hard to say if it's a great use of artistry, right? Because maybe it will be.
Yeah.
I'm thinking out loud anyways.
The difference you see the distinction I'm making there, right?
I do, yeah. And I'm just like playing devil's advocate for our audience here a little bit, thinking aloud. Like some of these things, I feel like we're just so early in the space, and we have all these assumptions about how things are going to go and what they're going to look like. And most times I think that we just don't know yet, or we don't have all of the information we need to know. I think like even the story I showed you guys earlier about Decentraland is like a good example of that. Like people probably thought Decentraland was going to be massive, probably thought because it was early and it had this big platform and it had a token, and it had all these different things that it was going to succeed. And it was going to, and that when they first sketched out the Decentraland world, that it probably looked phenomenal. And people were probably asking the same thing. Is this a good use of artistry, building a metaverse like this or whatever it is? But now we're kind of seeing that, right now, it doesn't look like it was a good use of time, but it's hard to say.
But
this is the one I'm referring to. Just pulling it up for the audience if they want to look it up.
1.3
like I'm like collecting from this whole conversation, and I continue to add that to my own worldview. It's like I feel like playing the prediction game in crypto is particularly not productive. And trying to say what is the right and wrong of certain things. Yeah, yes, we should have opinion. We should be convicted about stuff. But I'm kind of always I've continued to follow the more of like, I'm going to leave the door just enough open to be caught off guard and be delighted that somehow good God knows why that crap worked. And I'm going to have to figure out the manifestation of why, right? I think like when I saw Decentraland, I didn't say I never felt bullish about these things, in part because I never quite cared about these metaversal land kind of projects. But like I kind of left in my head, it was just like, if it does work, good for it. I'm gonna go and maybe do some research and learn about it, see why it did work. But if it doesn't work, I move on. Like maybe that's also part of my jaded kind of attitude towards this world. It's just like shit works, shit doesn't work.
Did you guys try crypto boxes? So on your note, like I was just thinking, like Crypto Voxels, like kind of worked in principle, right?
Kind of
Because
worked.
it did like a gallery kind of thing. Like, let's go build a place where you can showcase your art. And we can have a bit of a community convergence.
Yeah,
But then, right?
like I was quite a big flipper for CV parcels back in the day. Yeah, it was fun, but then it kind of like got outgrown by the NFT space, right? And
Right.
I mean, I think predicting the future it's not predicting the future. We're trying to engineer the future by you want to build the future you want ultimately. This is my thought process.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's where I think you do want conviction is you build the one you want versus right build whatever the trend is. Right, that sucks more than anything else.
And like
Right.
you know, I always bring up the like in payment processing because it's the oldest thing in crypto. It is the oldest use case, right? Like that was from day one. People were thinking about that, but none of those people predicted the emergence of OnlyFans, which is actually the greatest breakthrough in payment processing consumer behavior.
Did you say OnlyFans?
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't hear what you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the greatest breakthrough, like in payment processing from a consumer standpoint.
How so? I'd love to hear this.
Because they got people to pay for something that people previously never paid for, and then now they got it to happen in mass, and they got people on both the sell side and buy side, which is a huge.
I hear you, but weren't people technically buying pornography beforehand, or like
not at the same
for like live stream services? I know it's not the same volume, but
not even as close to the same
I
volume.
understand that they made it more personal, and they I do get that part. Yeah.
So the sell side,
they basically commoditize your own image, but go ahead.
Yeah, so like being able to process payments at the individual level was a massive innovation that OnlyFans created, right? That was not really happening at scale before. That it could just be spun up like that. And
do you mean in terms of technical innovation?
Where does Twitch fit in all of this?
That's what I was thinking too. Like the whole tipping movement and the whole, donations, Patreon, fucking even PayPal today. And, like, are you talking in terms of technicals?
Well, no, I'm not talking about
because in my opinion, I feel like Twitch cleared that path out first.
No, because I think tipping is a fundamentally different behavior than buying a product.
So you're talking like a different subsection of creation, right? Like as in you pretty much are buying
consumption,
semi-bespoke pictures from a different.
Do you own those though when you use OnlyFans? Do you like? I've never used. Do you? No. Well, I mean, like, no shame if anyone's tried it, but I'm just asking, like, do you guys have any idea? Like, would you actually own that product, or is it you like have the right to?
No, my continued understanding from the grapevines is like it's almost like kind of commissioning.
I see.
To an extent, it's like, hey, I want a picture of you with this constraint.
Yeah.
Please and thank you. And then some even folks like figured out like I can sell my panties or whatever and
create a secondary market.
right.
The key thing is the sell side, right? So before you couldn't really get people to process payments unless it was a very sophisticated company that set up all the infrastructure to get that through, right?
Well, is that a payment thing?
You mean like a Venmo kind of thing, or?
Yeah, because remember, like Visa and MasterCard, none of these people wanted to process payments for them. So they were only working with a very few select players. And all of a sudden, they're able to flip
hear what you're saying. Yeah.
And get payments through for every person. That's like the greatest indication of, like, that's really what crypto was designed to do at first, is on the sell side, receive payments, right?
Yeah. How did they do that? How did they make it such that they were,
Yeah, I really don't know.
Because I mean, like that would be, obviously there's levels to it. Like I do think what you were saying before, Dave, has merit. Like Twitch, in some regards, did clear the way. Like they probably felt comfortable allowing these payment rails because Twitch.
Well, I think they, without Twitch, I think OnlyFans may have not been able to push as hard.
Right, especially
in the grand story of creating content online. Twitch was helpful to the grand story that is OnlyFans.
YouTube, right. Twitch, and that, of course, right? It's a natural progression, but like. Again, Twitch and YouTube both require you to be at nearly the highest tier to even before you can even receive funds, right? You need to be having concurrent stream.
Right. So I guess they cleared some of the path, but not the whole path, right? And
yeah, and then that's a big gap to being able to spin up a page on OnlyFans, and all of a sudden you can start receiving you can start making $10,000 like in a month, right? That's a big difference.
I'm curious.
So,
I'm curious, like how much of the like again, just inquiring about like the nature of OnlyFans. Like, is this a thing where like, is it just people selling personal images, or is there like more activity and there's a reason why it was accepted? Like, for example, are people also selling non-nude but sexy images or whatever it's supposed to be? Like, is
I
there
think it's preferential because I know I was reading I literally was reading a TechCrunch article on one of the very famous like current like top making money Twitch streamers. I think that she's like Amaranth or whatever. Her name, her like her tag, and she's like, and she's like apparently it's just like making like 300,000 a month on OnlyFans as like the top creator. And so I was like reading a Reddit like comment post about it, and they're like, "Does she actually sell nudes?" I was like, "No, she just like you never see her fully naked, or you never see like some people says like you don't even like she doesn't even like uncover herself on the upper half, right? Like she literally is just all seductive things, and then she just plays that like freaking carrot really well, and that gets her, like I'm gonna be honest with her. I've seen pictures of her. She's not like a particularly, I think, uniquely attractive woman. Like I not to be. This is gonna. I hope I don't get canceled in saying what I'm gonna say. But
play with fire here, dog.
It's a commodity. It's like it's a I wouldn't say like, oh, I need your.
No particular.
I hear what you're saying. They're saying like these. Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that gender is a commodity. I'm not trying to imply that, but I'm saying like as a thing, like I
people have since the very inception of being able to share imagery been sharing pornographic adult explicit images. Even like the very first sketches are pretty funny actually.
It's like the nature of the content is like not the interesting part. It's just like how they were able to get people to pay for it, which is like a multi-factor thing of like Instagram, people being able to follow other
people. Are you more surprised by the how or like the fact that people are paying? I just want to
probably the how, right?
The how, right? Okay.
It's two, right? It's how and then why, right? Because the why makes sense.
Why makes sense to you, but the how was the grand miracle to you.
Yeah, the how is a huge shift because the thing is, getting people to pay for something is not rocket science, right? It's like you said, sex sells. But the big difference is that all the people who weren't doing it before are now all of a sudden doing it. Right, it got normal.
But now there's a marketplace for it, right? That's why I keep thinking. Well, now the distinguishing factor is like, oh, there's an OpenSea or whatever.
No, you could always buy porn. It was always available to buy, right? Actually, you got frozen a bit, or am I frozen?
No, he's frozen.
Okay, but
you're saying how like if a female decides to be very enterprising, she has a means to do it now. And that's what OnlyFans gave.
And then before she did not. Yeah, before.
Okay, sure. Right. So that
very specialized means. But I'm saying on the buy side, it was always available.
Right. So OnlyFans innovated on the fact that you could be like a normal woman out there living your normal life and do this as a part-time, and congrats. Exactly. You're buying yourself a new car, right?
Yeah, so it's like the same innovation as Uber, basically. It's like providing the sell side. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. Like people always wanted cabs, people always wanted groceries delivered, but now you have the sell side to do it, right? And that's the innovation. And
you mean like the payment rail in particular?
So you're almost implying like OnlyFans kind of they figured out how to order match this buy side to a potentially very
not even doing complicated.
Isn't that a marketplace?
Order matching is happening on Instagram, and then OnlyFans is mostly the payment and content.
Okay, that's actually even more interesting to you.
Yeah. Sure. That's why it's very fascinating what's happening there.
Yeah. Basically, what you're doing is like you're making yourself a brand. The images you sell are like the commodity of your brand. It travels the internet. Your brand is on the internet, and OpenSea is the marketplace that which you buy that.
Right? Instagram is the hook for the kid to get the kid through the door, right? But then the OnlyFans is the NFT. Essentially.
No, don't do that. No, but it's really interesting to see. It kind of makes me think like, I wonder, okay, so like what the progression is here. So it's like, okay, we had years ago it was like porn, and then then you had like porn sites that got more advanced, and then there was like probably bespoke porn sites. Now you have like bespoke imagery. I'm like, what's the next evolution in this industry? Is it going to be, you know what I mean? It's going to be it's hard
Well, I
to
think
say.
the innovation
Yeah.
has been like selling used articles of clothing, right? I don't know what else, what are we going to do post that.
I mean, that is
Interesting.
So I want to
Yeah.
ask then.
Holds the
Yeah.
Do you
leather
think there's a? Do you
Ledger
think
up,
there's
yeah.
a? I'm holding a ledger. I don't because I was.
waving it like a wand, you know.
Yeah. So I want to ask then. Do you think there's a bubble with the OnlyFans market?
Yeah, probably.
Right. Yeah.
Probably
Right.
there's a bubble. At the same time,
Like, do you think this recession would like put OnlyFans creators out of their OnlyFans jobs out
I think it'll put it
there's
OnlyFans up.
will be just like a re-emphasis. Like, to be honest, like not that many people talked about the negative effects of pornography in the last like decade. Like very extensive. Like it's not been in cultural zeitgeist. I think we'll see that as the next innovation of this. Basically, it'll be a reversal effect of like, all right, people are going to very much like skew the opposite way, you know, of that of the porn. Because this is the epitome. Basically, we reached like the peak. Like once everybody, it's like Uber for porn, basically, right? That's what OnlyFans really is.
And I think there should be probably a counter reaction to it to an extent,
Mhm.
and that's kind of like the post bubbling effect. Like, have you guys seen those like almost like they're like short? I don't watch TikTok, but I watch like YouTube Shorts occasionally. There's like a guy who just goes up to a random stranger in a really luxury car, and he's just
Yes.
like, "What do you do for a
What's that
living?"
guy's name? Andrew or something? I don't
Whatever,
know.
right?
Yeah.
And then whenever it's like a fairly attractive female, like it's almost like 90% chance it's like an OnlyFans situation.
Yeah.
And I'm like sitting here wondering, it's like, this is just rhyming with like the NFT bull. Like, and I obviously I don't understand that market well enough to know is there actually bubble like economics, but like how people are behaving with their deployed capital looks very like a bubble like behavior.
At the
So I
same
always
time,
like sat there thinking, I was like,
I don't know. It's like there's so many compounding like much of it actually has to do with changing society and changing male behaviors, right? It's like which are probably only going to get worse. Frankly, I don't see any short-term reversal happening, or even long-term reversal happening. It's just going to get more shitty, right?
What
It's
is bubble? Sorry, go ahead, Ash. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, bubble would just imply that like I don't know, you invest in something, you're kind of getting something out of a return, but most of this is going to just be the long term.
So I think a bubble popping would be like a collapse of like people thinking this as like a instant like stimulus check opportunity, given that you're willing to participate. Like I think a lot of people do think it's like free money if you're a fairly attractive woman.
Right. Isn't this just
given that
like
you're willing to do it?
Right. And isn't this just the effect of like these bubbles per se in almost in every industry of just like being early and like people, so like the first early 10,000 people who become big, their quote unquote value gets inflated because they were early to the party. Others start flooding in, the value of those top assets pops and comes down, and the whole value of the market kind of sorts itself out. And like you see this you kind of see this in not just like markets, but market segments. Happen with altcoins. It's happening with NFTs. It happens in every marketplace. And I was just thinking, like,
and I mean, I guess like I'm not saying it's like there's like bubble pops that people don't want this anymore. I just think the perception of it, the readily and available supply will start to be a little bit more self-conscious and more sophisticated as an actor. Maybe
will change. The memenomics are largely probably going to be the driving force.
Like to kind of go a little tangentially away from this, I think we're kind of going to be starting to see the reckoning of this CS job market bubble very soon, where a lot of places are freezing, and if there's freezing and the stock market doesn't perform well, VCs can't get their exit liquidity. Just going to 4 years and hoping for a 6-figure job in the Silicon Valley will become a little less easier and easier, right? And I think that's going to eventually become like freshmen who go undeclared will be like, okay. I think back at at least in my years, it was like I remember like just everyone was like at one point you're just going to become a CS major, like that just was the case, right? Yeah. Maybe later it's a little bit more formula. I assume for a very long time it's still like be a CS major is still the default answer for most undeclared people who don't want to be poor for a life, I guess. But I think that mythos is collapsing in that area too, where it's getting harder and harder to just get a 6-figure plus massive comp options package to just do nothing at Facebook and build.
To be honest, from my schooling at Georgia Tech specifically, like it was only like 25% or less were entering that tier of engineering anyway. So it's not like we weren't seeing it. It was happening in front of us, Like very few of us were entering into like the Google, the whatever, the Silicon Valley companies anyway.
It's like every
I think
program,
that
right?
it creates like that trickle down economics. Not that okay. Well, right, like if Google's willing to offer those things, they pick up enough of that, like of the talent, such that some of the talent that doesn't get it will kind of make do with a B tier package.
Yeah.
Right.
And that creates that ripple effect where people even working at like Oracle to shit on Oracle gets really juicy packages because Google's out there. Right? Like I have friends who work at Capital One and their packages are really good for honestly for the work they're outputting, questionable at best, right? Like right, and that goes all the way down to startups, and that gives you the exit, whatever. Right? So like Facebook's freezing hires, right? We're gonna start seeing other companies they're doing hire freezing. When the layoffs starts happening, right? You're gonna see a flooding of the market with like mid to senior level engineers. And I'm gonna be honest, if I'm like a hiring manager, I prefer somebody who's like a year out of Facebook than like a fresh grad, because at least the kid has like working experience, paid by Facebook for a year, right? So
absolutely,
I think it would create that crunch, and I'm wondering, is there something that rhymes here with to bring it all the way back to the OnlyFans bubble, right? Like, will there be this kind of trickle economics that will eventually just affect people to the point where like, oh crap, like this isn't as easy as it. Like I think that's what Twitch kind of went through for a while, where like everybody and their mother wanted to be a Twitch streamer, but then they realized that Twitch takes like 50%, 30 to 50% of the cut from a subscription. Certainly, it's a very difficult business to be operating on, right? And if you're good at it, you can make a lot of money. But if you're not good at it, it's going to be like a part-time thing at best, right? Like
wouldn't TikTok be a really great example of that?
Yes,
like
TikTok,
they're decreasing the amount they pay their influencers, they're capped at a certain level, etc. If you got in early, you had the opportunity to make a lot of money. That bubble seems to have popped. Just another market playing its way.
And they're labor markets, but compared to an asset market or property market, they have a lot of things that rhyme, right? And I think I like to think OnlyFans is going through that phase a little bit. I think they're still having the heat of it all. But yeah, I find it interesting to see, because this reminds me like one of my favorite subreddits is r/ask subreddit. And one of the questions that was brought up was, what is it like anecdotally to date somebody who has an OnlyFans?
Oh, I've seen this.
I saw that exact post.
I've actually
and I was
seen
reading
that too.
it, and I was reading it, and I was just like, "Holy cow!" I'm too much of a rationalist sometimes to understand you're not just paying time or whatever. You're paying a lot of unfathomable things in a relationship, and I've heard from the other partner, it's been a rather negative experience for.
I can imagine.
For your partner to do OnlyFans,
like who? It's not rocket science, right? Like people are talking about the new thing.
I mean, if your partner works in adult content or something already, that's understandable. But if it's just like I'm sitting with my wife one day and she's like, "Hey, love, I'm gonna start an OnlyFans account," that's gonna be hard as shit to choke back, right?
Right. And I really did think about it. It was like beforehand, like I'm not. I don't think I fully. I don't think people will call me like a feminist of sorts. Like I definitely agree with a lot of those things, but I'm not going out in the streets screaming for gender equality. Like I'm not an activist in that way. But like if I had a partner that would come to me and be like, "Hey," beforehand, it would have been like, "I want to start something like this," was like, is this something for I would ask, I was like, first, like, is this something you're pretty comfortable for? Is there something that is
Sure.
about
Yeah.
like body positivity, or is this
Mhm.
about getting money? If it's getting money, then I would strongly urge you to not do it. But if this is
Yes.
something about your own character,
Then
I'm willing to
express
think about it.
yourself. Right.
Right? I'm willing to think about it. But at this point, like, it's like I have a pretty hard opinions. Like, if I have a partner in life that like wants us to do an OnlyFans, we're done. We're done. Like, I'm not.
It's not gonna work.
This
Here's
is not
a
gonna
funny
work for me. Like, it's
Here-
like I have
here's
like
a
hard
really
no.
funny question, guys. How much money would they have to pay you guys to do OnlyFans? It doesn't mean it has to be nude, but like to make a profile, build a brand, you know, like whatever that could be. It could be whatever you want. But how
It
much
can be
money would
whatever
you
you
have to be
want.
paid to
If
do?
it can be whatever you want, and they're gonna, then we can just.
It has to work though, Ash. It has to work.
Yeah, it's a toughie. I don't know. I'm sure David could come up with some crazy shit.
He's got the numbers on
a
the
bit of
spread or
money
something.
Huh?
I don't know. I feel
Mhm.
since I've been doing the perfect beauty thing, like I realize I'm not that willing to bend to the whims of money incentives.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. I was just thinking about it because like quite seeming like not okay, so the greatest performer I've ever seen on OnlyFans that I've come across, and like I'm not looking for it, but you come across it, you'll see like, oh, this person seemingly made $2 million in a month and 3 million in the next and 1 million in the next, and they're probably like top tier, maybe top 10 OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Right? The average person on OnlyFans is probably just making a few bucks, right? And I keep thinking, well, like how much do you got to incentivize people to make that kind of content? Because I mean, like, I'm sure it's not easy. Like any form of producing any content, there's going to be a strategy, to create a winning strategy, right?
I mean, they're
And think of, like,
professionals. They commit lifestyle, but they're choosing
Yes.
that path, right? And like, you can't have anything. And if anything,
Right.
which bubbles are proving to us, is that just people are being pushed more and more to the
Right.
margins and to the extremes.
Do we even have an idea though of like what that market size would look like? Like, or like, I guess I'm thinking like, how do you know like what you're getting, what the reward trade-off's going to be? Like, yeah, you saw one person on the internet who succeeded, but how do you know? And the reason I ask is just because like, obviously there's a lot of young people out there who are going to grow up and be like, because like you've probably seen this, the job that most people want to be in America is like an influencer, right?
Yeah.
And so like you think about it, like TikTok, there's a lot of or not TikTok, sorry, OnlyFans. There's a lot of influencers who are maybe even are TikTokers or Twitch streamers or whatever, and they have a lot of influence, and then they have the OnlyFans that they're making profit off of, which is honestly very smart business. But then we have like
Shit. Up though. Even my internet's fucked. All right, you back, Dave?
Yep.
Dave's back. I think we might have to call it. Internet's getting real
All right.
choppy.
We went on like quite a journey of the internets today.
Yeah. I actually have to go to the gym soon.
Okay, we're back. Yeah, we've been seeing a bit of interference this call. I'm not sure if you guys could see or hear me. Do I just like disappear in those moments, or what's going on your end?
You freeze frame, I think.
Yeah, but you just get back now, so it's working.
The only thing I'm wondering about is because the host, I don't know if it switches hosts when one person falls out or not. Does it?
I think so. Yeah, because we're all joining from the same account. So.
Okay, that's valuable. Yeah, because I was worried. Well, if I fall out or you fall out, what happens, kind of thing, for on the hosting end. But
do you want to?
But yeah,
we called after it was a good 2 hours.
Yeah, it was good. I thought it was interesting talking about even just OnlyFans and seeing. I mean, OnlyFans is a pretty recent innovation that people are capitalizing on, and just as is, it's just so are NFTs, and these just exploring and chatting about these different marketplaces can be pretty interesting. Like, I've never sat there and thought about the value of an OnlyFans and when you really do think about it, like you can see why people would want to, you know, participate in that kind of market. It's just interesting. They're always such interesting case studies.
It did for women what NFTs did for digital artists, basically. Kind of.
Yeah.
It's like you're providing sell side liquidity. So
you guys? I don't even want to.
Go ahead.
I don't even want to mention the name because like it's pretty explicit, but there was a project that came out on Binance chain that was OnlyFans on the blockchain essentially. And do you guys know what I'm talking about? There was a token associated with it as well. I'll
Comcoin or some
yeah, like there was a whole bunch of
I
like
think I've heard of
really
this. I've heard
there's
of
a whole
this.
bunch of other ones that were just like really, really bad. And I was
You
like,
remember Stake Chain was a 2017 thing, David. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was one of them. Yes. That is ridiculous. Yeah. So like, but these are all things too, though, that I wonder, like, perhaps those ideas in principle are really, really good, but that these people are just very, very, very early to the market. Yeah. Because I could see if NFTs did for artists what OnlyFans is doing for people who want to post images, wouldn't you think that the next evolution would be to just like tokenize those images, give them ownership rights over their own IP? So wouldn't you think like a platform, Web3 platform?
I think the innovation is what you're selling.
So
yeah.
So wait. So like, let's ask the big. I want to ask the question: is in this case for explicit imagery, is right-click save a feature or a bug?
The bug.
Right-click.
Bug.
Well, they have it such that some of these, like for example, if you're not a member of OnlyFans, you can't use it, right?
What do you mean by use it?
Like I don't think you can use. Go ahead, Mash.
Like you can use it, you can screenshot it. Yeah, people do that shit all the time. They leak stuff, right? But the content moderation is kind of mind blowing between Instagram, Reddit, and OnlyFans. Like their level of keeping content off Reddit for free is impressive, to be honest. Very impressive. Because otherwise, like you would think that all this content would just be everywhere and for free, right? And that would devalue OnlyFans, but no, it's moderated very extensively. But I think again, the question is not how you sell something anymore. At least for the immediate future, is what you're selling. I think is important.
Big time.
Yeah.
And yeah, with that, sex sells in all formats. Right.
Dude, but anecdotally, the guy who made Spank Chain, the guy's actually like low-key a brilliant person.
Oh, really?
Amin. Yeah, he made a lot of the modern DAO thinking, like Moloch DAOs, all these kind of DAOs.
Oh, really?
His brainchild. So like
yeah,
which is just funny. I always found it funny that the guy who made Spank Chain in 2017,
right,
he's like the grandfather of a lot of modern DAO thinking and philosophy.
Yeah.
You know,
wasn't there an improvement on Spank Chain? Like, didn't somebody come out with like a comparable product? I don't know, but like I remember like at the same time that gaming NFTs were pumping in 2021. There was all these like adult content tokens that were pumping. Do you guys remember this? When you guys would see like Cummies and everything. Yeah. And like at that time, it looked like there was like 4 or 5 actual products that were in this industry that were coming out, but they were probably just hype, right?
Yeah.
Or smoke and mirrors or whatever. But yeah. Well, anyways, guys, 2 hours, 13 minutes. We could probably wrap it up here. To everyone who listened, I hope you guys enjoyed that colorful conversation. Always a fun time. We sure appreciate everyone who tuned in. Make sure to catch us next week, Fridays, 3 p.m. Eastern.